Hi, my name is Paul Royer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Pasadena, California, and I've decided to put together a series of discussions about how to most effectively deal with the challenges that parents are facing today. The first video in the series that we want to try to talk about is dealing with children and adolescents and the management of screen time. Now, this is an extremely broad topic and it requires a lot of attention as screens have become more important and dominant in our children's lives. This is very difficult because for many of us as parents, we did not grow up having to face the challenges of knowing how to deal with screens. Most of us were raised with limited television channels. We did not have cell phones. We did not have iPads. So there's a much different context that our children have to deal with today, and this makes it difficult for us because we may not know how to effectively set limits and boundaries with them. Many parents have different types of questions. Some are very specific about how many hours that their child should be allowed to have on their screens. Others are concerned about bullying, exposure to provocative material, or even obsessiveness around games and difficulty disengaging from their peers. So what we'd like to try to do here today is to talk about a structure that will help us as parents be more effective in knowing how to create effective boundaries with our kids. The first thing we have to understand is that our children are going to naturally want to be connected to their friends. For them, it is a social context. So whether it is a child who is extremely interested in having the highest score on some video game, or whether it's a teenager who wants to be consistently connected to their peer group, we as parents need to understand that that is a normal desire of our children. This is a time as they grow and develop to want to be involved in social activities and also to have some social status. Now, that may not be what we're thinking about because we would prefer that they were doing chores or studying their schoolwork. But for the kid, they have a much different perception. That's what creates the natural conflict between the parent and the child. How do I teach my child how to disengage from something that they want to do and help them find the time and the internal structure to know how to do the things that they need to? This is the goal of adolescent development. So let's also try to give a little bit of understanding to the need for structure. Each of us has a structure in our home. Our children have learned very, very effectively about what the rules and boundaries are. If we are very lenient in our structure, then the children will have a difficult time often to know how to seek out appropriate boundaries, effectively have behaviors that will allow them to be successful. If we're overly strict or rigid with our structure, then the children oftentimes feel confined or controlled, and then they will subsequently feel the need to rebel. The biggest mistake in structural development, primarily around use of screens, the internet, and the media, is for us as parents to be inconsistent. If you tell the child you get to play the video game for 1 hour, that means it needs to be 1 hour. If you tell them 1 hour and then you forget, and then an hour turns into an hour and a half or 2 hours, then the child quickly learns that you don't really mean what you say. So whatever the rule or the boundary is, you need to follow through on it. Also understand that a child's natural desire is to want to try to push the boundaries and make it so that they can develop their own internal structure where they're doing their own thing. Our job as parents, particularly in use of devices, is to give the child some latitude to learn how to micromanage themselves and that we don't have to do it for them all the time. Of course, the rules are very, very different for a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old. At 12, the child requires you as the parent to consistently monitor the structure. But as they get older, we need to slowly let them have more control over their own time management. As they get older and move into adulthood, they're going to have to learn how to manage themselves. If we've not taught them this skill over the last 6 or 7 years throughout adolescence, we send them off into adulthood unprepared to know how to complete tasks on their own. Please remember that the goal of adolescence is to help teach the child how to develop these internal mechanisms. If we don't help them over time learn the natural logical consequences of their choices, then we set them up for failure as they move into adulthood. Now let me take a brief moment to talk about consequences. If you tell the child that if you don't take out the garbage, I'm going to take away your cell phone for a month, that might be an overly rigid consequence that you would probably have a very difficult time enforcing. Your job as the parent is to come up with reasonable consequences that will teach the child how to most effectively learn from the consequence, because you've got to remember, it is their job to try to push those boundaries, find the limits. So for us as parents, consistency is the most important thing, particularly around the use of devices. You cannot say that you're going to punish a child by taking away a device for an extended period of time and then give it back to them too quickly. Let's talk a little bit more about the social context that is going on for children as they're using these devices. As I said previously, children naturally want to spend time with their friends and like to be connected. It gives them a sense of status, a sense of feeling connected and accepted by their peers. This can also be very, very difficult, though, because if the child is constantly connected to his peer group, A, they're not having any time to truly engage with the activities that are going on right in front of him. That could be paying attention to what's going on within the family. That could be paying attention to what's going on within their academics. The child also needs to have some time to be disconnected from the peer group. This gives the child the opportunity to learn how to be reflective. If they're constantly connected to someone else, there's no time for the brain to relax and for the child to reflect on what's going on in my life. This is very, very important for ego development over time so that the child can learn how to internally manage and regulate themselves. Also, from a social context, what we've learned over time is that children are really struggling to pay attention to social cues and aware of their surroundings. The more time they have their face down in a screen, the less time they're paying attention, not just to the comments and the surroundings, but also to the social cues and the facial expressions of those who are around them. This is a skill that is learned throughout the life phase and throughout the child's development. If they don't learn these skills as they move into their adult life, they're less adept at being able to pick up nonverbal expressions, and they have a more difficult time knowing how to manage their own reactions to these situations. When the child does not know how to react to a situation, it leads to a sense of insecurity, stress, anxiety, and makes it more difficult for them to know how to move into their adult life phase. So let's try to pull a lot of these ideas together, because it's very, very important for us as parents to feel like we're able to have discussions with our children about the social experiences they are having. So we must always feel like we know what is going on in their social world. Should you as a parent be able to access your child's information? Of course the answer is yes. As they get older and move towards adolescence, and they move into adulthood, they do need to have more of an ability to have some privacy. But even then, the potential for your child to be exposed to profoundly provocative material, whether that's of a sexual nature or of a substance abuse nature, the potential for your child to be able to be bullied or to be mistreated on the internet is also something that we as parents need to keep a close eye on. We have to make sure that we have a good level of communication and trust with our children so that we can talk with them about these situations. As parents, we also must role model appropriate boundaries. If you're the parent who comes home and is spending all your time reading emails, or if you as a parent coming home and playing games, your child is constantly watching you. Remember that just as we tell them that they need to shut off their devices, we must learn how to do that also, so that we're able to effectively teach them how to handle these situations and create the appropriate boundaries. We also need to make sure with our children that we're talking with them about very challenging or difficult subjects. As the internet has become more invasive and there is more information that is available to children, adolescents, and young adults, it forces us as parents to get more comfortable about talking about what they're observing. There's a lot of exposure and a lot of ability for teenagers to be exposed to sexual content, the ability to access and obtain marijuana, booze, pills. All these things are issues that we as parents have got to get comfortable talking with our kids about what they are experiencing. It's not enough for us as parents just to tell them not to do things. That doesn't stop them from being interested, curious, and it definitely doesn't decrease their exposure or their ability to access information, which may not always be reliable on the internet. So there's obviously many things we have to do as parents. Set up good structure. We have to keep open lines of communication. We really need to role model effective behavior. If we as parents take time to engage with our children around how to effectively utilize and manage the information that they're obtaining, we'll be able to have much more positive relationships with them and guide them more effectively through adolescence. So this is the first in a series of video webcams, and I hope that it was helpful and informational for you. Please feel free to leave comments and subscribe to my channel, as I will be checking it regularly. Parenting is a very, very challenging job, and it is most effectively done by coming together with other people who understand the challenge and can support you in coming up with the most effective way to help your child and adolescent. Goodbye.